Welcome to Cure America. I'm Star Parker, and it's a new day in America. Amidst all of the distressing news in Afghanistan, the COVID crisis, growing inflation, and so many other issues, there is a ray of hope. Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 case that made abortion legal on a federal level, may soon be on the ash heap of history. On September 1st, in a remarkable 5-4 decision, the United States Supreme Court refused to block a Texas law that banned abortion after a baby's heartbeat is detected. Usually that's around 6 weeks of pregnancy. And this bill that Texas passed is actually called the Heartbeat Bill. To be clear, the Supreme Court did not reach any decision or conclusion on the constitutionality of the Texas law or of abortion itself. But in this particular case, the abortion providers who challenged the law did not sufficiently address procedural questions. You know, this decision has given pro-lifers real hope. Hope that we may soon see the end of legalized abortion in our precious country. How? Why? Well, because the Supreme Court had already decided to take up an abortion case in their next session that could really overturn Roe v. Wade and could overturn Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the cases that have allowed for abortion through the 9th month, 9th hour in our country. The Mississippi case, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, is a challenge to the constitutionality of the Mississippi law that banned abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. So you follow me here? Mississippi passed a law that you cannot have an abortion after 15 weeks. When the Mississippi legislature passed this law in 2018, Jackson Women's Health Organization went to court. They wanted to challenge it. They said, we're going to challenge the constitutionality. We're going to block the state from enforcing it. Well, now the Supreme Court took it up. So now we have Texas and Mississippi. Mississippi at the court, Texas in law. And with these two events, there is a bit of enthusiasm in the air for pro-lifers that America has moved very close now to the end of embracing abortion. Oh, it's a long journey. And yet I'm one of these women full of zeal, renewed hope. In particular, I think because after having experienced abortion firsthand and the lies of that industry, I tell you, there are a whole lot of women like me who are saying, really? It's over now? We can finally say, not only have I been wrong and God has forgiven me, but now we can stop it from others getting in that place? Oh yeah, years ago, I was lost in sexual recklessness. I had 4 abortions, and I, like far too many others, walked into this lie that resulted in death without any counsel or information about the distinct humanity of the life that was growing within me. Oh, I heard all the propaganda from the abortion peddlers, in school, in the media, from community and political leaders. Yet I never heard anything about infant development in the womb, or anything about their souls, or about the unique heartbeat that was yearning to live. That's why we have a heartbeat bill now. Okay, perhaps then in the late 70s, one could argue that little was known about the development or mortality of the embryo or the fetus. Very few instruments were available to detect humanity. There were no medical instruments or scientific instruments. We have very, very few. But today, oh no, due to modern technology, we are without excuse. We can no longer argue about fetal development or viability. With the advent of the ultrasound, where we can now measure brain waves and heartbeats within the womb, we're without excuse. So we're going to delve deep into the issue of abortion this week on Cure America. And for those that want to flip the TV, no, don't do that, because we have information for even those of you that are struggling with a broken heart because of an abortion. Our panel of policy and legal experts are going to walk us through this. They're going to walk us through the court cases. They're going to walk us through the rhetoric of pro-abortion extremists. We're going to walk through this historic moment and what we were going to hear next spring from the Supreme Court. They are well prepared to help us sort through the noise of the news to find some truth. And we're going to help you find truth for your life and for the lives of those you love right after this important message.
It's time for a cure. CURE is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE, join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
I have my distinguished panel, people that you may recognize. I know you recognize Jonathan because he's here with me all of the time. Jonathan Alexandre from the Liberty Counsel Action. Yeah. Whoa, you guys have been really busy with this COVID stuff. People are getting forced to take vaccines.
Yeah, about 20,000 people have reached out to us just hoping to find a solution to not being forced to take these vaccines that have fetal tissue in them. So we've been giving them the legal representation that they need in order to push back against these mandates.
This is not what this particular episode is about, but I am so thankful that you guys over at Liberty Counsel, and I think a lot of other groups now are saying, wait a minute, we got to get in front of this.
Yeah, hopefully there's the harvest is plenty. There's a lot of people that can get into the fight, and so we're encouraging folks to not back down, but also legal groups as well to join into the fight and help out your fellow Americans that are pushing back against these vaccines.
Oh, it's really interesting. But we're going to talk today about a very, very interesting topic. So thank you for being here with us, a handle on abortion and what we should be looking at with the court cases. So we'll talk about that a little bit after I introduce Charmaine Yoest. Some of you know Charmaine. She's been with me before and has been a friend of mine for years. Oh my goodness, it's getting close.
It's great to be here.
It's good to see you again. Heritage Foundation, she is now. In fact, you're the Vice President at the Institute for Family, Community, and Opportunity.
It's a mouthful.
It's not only a mouthful, it's a lot of work, but you're doing incredible work over there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and you must be really excited after having spent so much time in pro-life, and you were over at the American Life League for years, and we're getting close.
It's unprecedented times, and I'm just thrilled that you're taking this time today to really delve into the topic.
Good. We need to, and we want to delve in from a lot of different perspectives. I want to also keep all the time the women, the men, the grandchildren, the grandparents, the siblings, everybody in mind. So that's why I'm so glad that you're with me, Melanie. Mallory Quigley, who now will have a new last name because you're engaged. So you're going to be married before the year is
Before
out.
the end of the year, yeah.
Right before the end of the year.
Actually on a day that we commemorate in the church for the Holy Innocents, the children that Herod killed in Bethlehem in the search for Jesus. So I like to think that we have a lot of intercessors praying for us and all the unborn children that we're fighting for every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you picked that day on purpose?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that part. You were just telling me the date. And we were talking about how it's near Christmas and all of that.
Yes,
but
yeah.
Wow, that is so special.
The Holy Innocents.
Ooh, it's so special that God is probably going to make you very fruitful and multiplied.
We shall see.
Yeah, we'll do like some of that we just outnumber the enemy by just keep having our children. But Mallory is the Vice President of Communications for Susan B. Anthony List. If you're not familiar with Susan B. Anthony List, it's SBAList.org. SBAlist.org. You need to know that because they're champions on making sure that we have political leaders who are pro-life, not just pro-life, anti-abortion.
Right.
So I'm going to start with you because you have spent record time. Your organization, everyone there is just amazing. I don't even want to start naming names of my friends that are there to make sure that when people go into the voting booth, they understand who really loves life,
right?
Who really knows that there's something wrong with abortion. Tell me what you guys were thinking as you saw these two cases coming through because of legislators that you guys have supported. And then you pulled together your talking points. What was in the room?
Well,
what does be apply in that room?
It was really encouraging to see the fruit of years of labor to put pro-life state legislators, like the ones in Texas and Mississippi, as well as the pro-life leadership in the House and the Senate and in the White House the last 4 years that gave us a Supreme Court that would take up this incredibly important abortion case that they have before them this fall. So sort of seeing the fruit of the battle on many fronts, kind of moving all these things forward at the same time between the state legislature, the federal legislature here in Washington, the changing of the Supreme Court, and obviously the changing of the hearts and minds, educating people about
at the same time.
the the what's at stake in the fight.
Right. I'm glad that you reminded us that even under the leadership of President Donald Trump, your organization was there. I mean, Marjorie was in every picture. Yep. Marjorie Denver, we've known her for years too. Yeah. Every picture that anyone sees when we were signing anything into law that protected the innocent, there she was. Yes. And so we're really proud of the things that you've done. And we'll get into the details of Texas that you mentioned and a little bit of Mississippi. We're going to spend some time on this. But Charmaine, I just want to find out, what are you thinking? How are you feeling inside on what we're seeing after such a dark moment? We've been walking dark for a long time.
We've been walking dark on a whole lot of issues. And so I think it's great that people have a ray of hope and a way to look forward and say, you know what, the strategy of I like to call it, borrow from the football metaphor, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Well, it's been dusty, and we've been just digging it out and moving the ball forward. And so I think we have to caution people that, there's no magic wand that makes things happen overnight. We've still got a long way to go, but people can take hope that we're moving the ball. And one of the things that's most exciting to me is you see out there in the media this storyline that women are being oppressed and that this is a setback from women. But, we're so glad to have you here, Jonathan, because this is an issue that cuts across. It's a human issue. But we're seeing you've got 3 women here who are celebrating this decision, celebrating this moment in time, and we're joined by a whole cloud of witnesses. And, there's women who are leading in Mississippi on that case. There's 11 pro-life female legislators in Texas who are leading on that case. All across the country, you have women who are standing up and saying that pro-life is pro-woman. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things to be a part of, is to push against the predominant narrative of that somehow women need abortion to be empowered.
Isn't that amazing how they've gotten away with that narrative for so long? And in fact, we know that it has weakened women. One of the difficulties that many have, even going into the pregnancy care centers, is to first admit that I've had an abortion. I feel so bad. What is it? Before they can even get their healing. But Jonathan, it does impact men. We're looking at movements like even support after abortion. They're having major conferences just for the men, and they're coming forward. So walk us through the more personal side of this. Let's talk about for a moment, before we get into the legal thing, that this is not just a day of celebration or a moment in time to celebrate what we're seeing in the courts, what Charmaine just talked about, to see the people themselves start in the pro-life community saying, gosh, we've been praying for this moment. But the people impacted,
absolutely,
in particular in the Black community.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the commentary that you'll hear as a result of the Texas law passing is that, well, this is going to affect Black and Hispanic women who now can't get abortions. Well, you turn that on its head, and that means that's more Black and Hispanic babies that are going to be brought into life. More Black and Hispanic babies that made up a majority or close to a majority of the babies aborted in the last 50 years are now going to receive a chance at life. And that's the incredible turnabout face that we can take from a good law that says we're going to start protecting life. And yes, despite it affecting the inner cities the most, that's exactly the target population that's going to benefit from it.
So you're going to have, it's like, okay, keep that narrative going. Absolutely. You're right. Yeah. It's going to hit them more disproportionately, and we're kind of happy because now we're going to see more babies. We see much more future. So I'm going to go with that law. Let's tell people what happened, because I even heard from a bishop this week and said, okay, I heard the soundbite about something's going on in Texas. Is this good or bad on abortion? So, yeah. I know you've been with this issue for a long time. Was that good or bad?
Something's going on in Texas. Something's going on across many states. So 14 other states have passed this law. And I remember...
But tell us the law, because some people have not followed every detail.
It's the heartbeat law is how it's coined. And it basically says if a doctor... and in this context, an abortionist detects a heartbeat, now they're required to test for that heartbeat. If it's detected, then, as the saying goes, that life is protected. You can no longer perform an abortion, terminate that baby's life because they have a heartbeat. And a heartbeat has been the universal symbol across the board that there is still life going on, whether it's an elderly person, and now in this case, a person that is within the womb. If a heart is beating, then that means that life is there and that ought to be protected.
But it's not protected in law yet, right? Because it's not protected like with 14th Amendment protections. This was more in the civil realm.
Yeah, and that's the trick and really the genius of what Texas did. These other states have had their laws passed, but immediately struck down by the federal court because these other states have put the onus on preserving this law on state officials. And so, when state officials or state courts are responsible to pass this law, a district court can come in and say, no, we're going to put a hold on this enforcement. No public official can enforce this law. What Texas did in a very genius way is saying, we're going to have civilians, we're going to have everyday Americans be able to enforce this law. They're going to be the ones that go after the abortionist and say that abortionist has violated the law. They're performing an abortion on a baby that is past 6 weeks old who has their heart beating. So now it's individuals bringing civil suits against abortionists, and that's not something that the court now is able to target. They can't go after civil suits in the same way that they were able to strike down. Yeah, it was an incredible move.
It's an incredible move. It's a brilliant move. And I think that over at Susan B. Anthony's list, you guys knew that these types of changes were occurring. What are you envisioning? Like, we already know that someone had set up a mechanism to report these, and then the left came in and started dismantling it or trying to put in all kind of interruptions to it. What are you seeing?
Well, what I think is so encouraging is that because of this new enforcement mechanism, the abortion lobby, actually, the abortion businesses in Texas have said they are going to comply. They do not want to risk the $10,000 fines.
How many clinics are we talking about still in Texas?
There's quite a few.
There's still quite a few. I knew they were building a huge monster down in Houston.
Yes.
And I know because in Mississippi only have one left.
Right.
So, but in Texas we have several. Well, I know we have a couple of hundred pregnancy care centers, but we don't have the number of abortion. But go ahead. So your point is that they're abortionists.
And the penalties for everyone involved, which is partly why the abortionists are so nervous about it. I think they might be able to swallow a $10,000 fine, but if you start levying fine for everybody who's involved in the room, it gets pretty costly.
Right. And so since last Wednesday, the abortion businesses, including Planned Parenthood, have said they are going to comply with this law. So we are estimating, local allies in Texas are estimating as many as 150 abortions being prevented in Texas per day, lives saved. So this is the first time that we've seen abortion businesses comply with the law in a way that it means lives are being saved.
And I want to get to the lives being saved, and I'm encouraged to hear that those types of numbers. But I'm not sure I trust yet that they're really going to just say, okay, we're gonna comply with this law, because then why do you have Lyft and Uber saying, well, our drivers, if they drop them off at a clinic, we'll take that liability, because the drivers of Uber and Lyft don't know where they're going with any of their customers. So I'm glad to see Uber and Lyft saying, well, if we're going to get involved in politics, then we better do it financially, because we could get hit hard, because they can. If a dad wants to save his kid and is on the way to an abortion clinic in an Uber should pay for that. Well, I think that the abortionists, I'm not sure what happens when they get to that door. Are they going to say, no, you can't come in?
Well, I think primarily it was Lyft. I'd want to double check on.
Yeah, Lyft did, but you were just throwing some money on the table too. Now all the companies, they're doing everything now. All of these woke companies that are now stakeholders companies are listening to half of the stakeholders. Well, the other half don't want this stuff.
We've heard from some corporations who are really wrestling with this, and you saw the whole fallout with the Georgia abortion law last year or the year before, where all these corporations came out and said they weren't going to do business in Georgia because of that. You're starting to see some kind of rumblings of that with Texas, and I think it's really important to communicate really clearly to corporations that this is a law that's supported by a lot of people. In fact, we already have polling data of very high levels of support specifically for the Texas law.
Really?
Yes. In fact, a plurality. So you have a higher percentage, 46%, I believe, supporting the bill versus something like 42% who
across
oppose
the country. So you're saying enough people are now understanding that we need to do something about this. And we're supporting what they're saying, that if somebody doesn't want that offspring killed, now they have recourse.
Well, I think part of it is, Star, and this is why I want to really underscore this, picking up on my point about women in the forefront, is there's really a misunderstanding in the popular culture about how pervasive pro-life sentiment is among the American people. If you look at this goes back, we've talked about this for years, right? It all depends on how you ask the question. Pollsters like to characterize the people who want limitations on abortion as being pro-choice, but a lot of those people who say, yeah, I think there should be abortion should be legal, but there should be limitations on it. And they'll characterize them as pro-choice when in actual fact, those people consider themselves more pro-life. And so this case in Texas is a really good example of they're putting a limitation on abortion. They're not saying you can't have an abortion at all, but it has to be before there's a heartbeat. Right. And in fact, the legislators wrote this law very meticulously. There is an exception for an emergency situation.
Yes, they did.
It's not an exception for the health of the mother, but an emergency situation certified by a doctor.
Which would include then rape and incest. They didn't protect the rape. Well, now if a girl got raped and she goes to the emergency room and says I got raped, now please get involved. Come on, that's an emergency right there. But I want to this whole, well, the American people say we like abortion, but just not this at this stage or that age. I want to push back on that, especially with you, Jonathan, because they said the same thing during slavery. That's how we ended up with manumission laws, and you can only do this to your slave, and maybe only do that to your slave, or maybe only keep them up in this state or not in that state. And it's just really a good idea I appreciate the polling, and I hope that sentiment is on our side to the degree that we can get rid of these laws and not just overturn them and throw them back into the states. We need to admit that abortion is wrong. There's something really sick in a society that kills its own.
And this is one of the instances where you let the other side, who's taken aback by how well this law has been written, let them talk themselves out. Some of the things that you're hearing from the other side is, well, we can't tell by 6 weeks if this child is going to have a genetic dysphoria.
Right,
so they're saying,
or that the mother doesn't know by 6 weeks.
Yeah,
Remember, they tried that one too.
Exactly.
She won't even know she's pregnant yet.
Yeah. So in essence, they're saying, well, if a child has Down syndrome, we probably would have killed it, but we can't even detect Down syndrome at that point. Now you have the left advocating for the killing of Down syndrome. They've done that against the Black and Hispanics. They've done it against Down syndrome. There's so many areas that they are talking themselves into a rut, and it's moving further and further away from where the average American is. The average American that is updated.
Which is what your point is.
That is my point exactly.
Yeah, the average Americans would start now. They hear this and get a little bit more uncomfortable.
Exactly, and that their people are more pro-life than the media likes to portray. It's because when they're not thinking about this kind of thing as being part of the abortion regime that they've signed on to. And so the more that they talk about this, the more that you have this satanic group down in Texas saying that they're going to give people medical abortions in flouting the law. People are kind of like, wait, hold up.
Yeah, maybe, but to that degree, are people going to hold up? Because how is it that we've been so comfortable with abortion already? I mean, it's not like we don't know what it is.
I do think more people do not know what it is, and this is why it's something I completely.
So they don't know that they're killing an offspring.
I think that there is an education gap between what people realize is happening or what people think is happening and what is actually happening, and so that's why it's so encouraging to see the national debate play out over this Texas law. It gives us opportunities to talk about, fetal development and what's happening at 6 weeks, the heartbeat, when we start to pick out these different genetic realities for children. And like Jonathan was saying, we have pro-abortion advocates now saying, well, we've got to make sure we're able to abort babies with Down syndrome. That is a very repellent argument. Absolutely. And so...
well, we think it's repellent. I don't know. I want to agree with you guys 100%, but the governor of Virginia, I think he was the governor, was saying, well, we should be able to even decide to kill the kid after it's born, and he's still the governor. I didn't see an uproar. Yeah,
I think what you will see between New York passing more extreme laws and some of these left states, these blue-leaning states passing more extreme laws, there will be a dichotomy in between the states. And ultimately, I think that's what pro-life legal advocates want again to happen. What the Roe v. Wade court came in and said, we're going to federalize it and make it across the board while the debate was still going on in the country.
different states.
Yeah, and so if we're able to pull back at least to the point where individual states can make their own decisions, of course, it's not going to be the final step or the ultimate step, but at least it'll allow the hearts and minds to get to the point that we're at this table, that abortion does end a life and that it is murder. At least it'll allow that debate to occur while not having the Supreme Court be giving this ultimate federal standard.
Yeah. I think, I'm sorry, Charmaine, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to tie your 2 points together about the education gap and where the American people are and how they're coming along, is that I think this is fascinating. I've even learned some things this last week about the heartbeat and when it starts. And you see the left, which likes to style themselves as the party of science, coming back and saying, well, it's just electrical impulses. And I think the American people are saying, electrical impulse, heartbeat, like what? And so I think for people, it's important for them to be learning this reality that the heartbeat starts so early in a woman's pregnancy. I think that's exciting to see.
Yeah, and it is a new reality. You're right. I mean, we changed our health classes in schools long time ago. People really don't know what's going on, to make your point.
Yeah, I think we need to start somewhere. So many people, even pro-life people, don't realize that the United States is one of 7 countries that allows abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. There's no limits in our country. Even like Governor Northam was saying in Virginia, a conversation can be had when a baby survives a failed abortion. And Jonathan's right that the left-leaning states, there are pro-abortion people there that know everything that's happening inside the womb, but want abortion to be legal without limits. And so, but there's so many people in the middle that don't have their mind, they're still catching up. They don't have their minds made up. And to have these national conversations where we're learning about the reality of fetal development and where we all started.
Well, okay, but we had national uproar with Gosnell. I mean, I think everyone was appalled, and then it went away. We saw recently with in the state of Indiana, after an abortionist died, over 2,000 fetuses just left in his yard. And I'm hoping that you guys are right, that the American people just really don't have a deep understanding of what is happening.
One of the things that'll come out of these cases, because the evidence has to be put out in a civilian tort case, the abortionists will now have to defend why they stopped a heartbeat after 6 weeks. So you're going to have cross-examination. You're going to have people on the stand in court records saying, this is why, past the point of 6 weeks, I had to terminate this life. I had to.
So that's what the law is saying, is that you now have to explain. If you do this, and you're dragged into civil court, you better have your defense prepared to say why you killed after heartbeat.
Exactly, and when so many of these cases...
Because the law forces them to do heartbeat analysis? Does the abortionists have to do? Okay,
they have
so
to do
the law says you must determine first if there's a heartbeat.
Correct.
Right.
So that might run them out of business right there, because they might not have the equipment to do that. Remember, they tried to pretend that they were doing ultrasounds, and they were not doing ultrasounds, or that they had admitting privileges to the hospital. And we found out that no, actually, if you have a botched abortion, she's going to die and then you're going to push her out in front of the hospital after she's dead. We keep seeing all of these things happen in our country. Yeah. But I don't mean to interrupt. So go ahead. So that's the law is you better look and see if there's a heartbeat.
Right.
If there is, you better have a really good reason in the court.
Yeah.
If you kill that
do
child
not pass, do not continue, stop what you're doing right now. And having that in court record is so important. I remember one of the cases that we fought in California, and this is to defend the folks that exposed Planned Parenthood. We had a doctor who committed abortions sitting on the stand, and for the first time in the record, she admitted that in order to preserve the organs to sell them, she would cut right here at the neck, cut at the hip, put clamps here so that the sternum and the organs within it would be retained. Now that's in court record. Every time that case is brought up, you'll see that testimony brought up. The cases before have never gone to this evidentiary standard. They've always been shut down, based on some procedural or some, nefarious
or the turning of the tables for what we saw when some journalists went into Planned Parenthood to catch them selling body parts. I mean, they changed that whole narrative to where now they ended up on trial.
Right, and so the incredible thing in these civil lawsuits, these doctors will now have to defend why they saw a beating heart and decided to end it, and that's brand new and an incredible thing.
Okay, it's brand new and incredible, and we're just going to have to hope that it holds. And so when we come back after this message, message, I want to go not only then will it hold, because I still now, I'm losing a little of my enthusiasm that maybe it's over because it sounds like we still have a lot of education to do. Sounds like we could still have a coarsening in our culture to say, well, I don't care anyway. I want to not only talk about what are the chances, what does it look like, but I also then want to turn to the people themselves. Life after abortion in our country. What happens next? Where are we prepared to be there for the people that need us because they have a vulnerable situation? We'll get into those issues right after this.
It's time for a cure. CURE is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE, join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
So much in this one, and we've been living with it for so long. It's so impacted everyone that not only has that been that coarsening, but I think there's just a numbness in our society that, oh my goodness, what happens if we don't have abortion available anymore for anyone? So there's concern there from some that we might have a lot of little babies to kiss. I don't know why. So Jonathan, you're going to have to help us sort through. Jonathan Alexandre, Senior Counsel at Liberty Counsel Action. And thank you. Constitutional attorney, I'd rather call him because that's too many counsels for me. And then Charmaine Yoest is over at Heritage Foundation now, but she's got a long record here in Washington, D.C. in public policy arena on pro-life. And I've just adored her for many, many, many years as a result, because our paths keep crossing as we're doing this work. And now I'm getting more excited about the end. And then Mallory, who's going to change her last name very, very soon here, is with Susan B. Anthony's List. And they are one of the premier organizations based here in Washington, D.C. that works all over the country to make sure that we have legislators who will do like they did in Texas and in Mississippi and in Washington. And we're grateful. We are so grateful. So walk us through, because now before the break, we were talking about what happens in Texas now that abortion won't be there? Because now we do have a situation where a dad, I'm really praying that it's the dad who's following the Uber and says, I'm suing you because I wanted that child. Because the men have had no recourse. This is, like you said, Charmaine, it's been a women, all knows about the women. They've had no recourse. You can kill his child and he can't even say anything. So walk us through the protection part. What about those that say, I don't want to be as extreme as the left, but I do kind of like that if there's a mistake, what happens to that girl? What happens to that family?
Well, I think, there's so many women right now in Texas who were abortion-minded who now no longer have that as an option today and for the foreseeable future while the litigation on this law continues. But there, at the same time that this Texas Heartbeat Protection Act was passed, the state legislature passed $100 million into a program, the Abortion Alternatives Program in Texas. So there's $100 million that are available for women and their partners, the fathers of the children, the families that are facing these unexpected pregnancies and perhaps don't know where to turn. There's also 200 pregnancy resource centers in Texas, which is amazing. That's not to mention the untold number of federally qualified health centers where women can go to for, the medical assistance that they're going to need. But I think it's so beautiful that the Texas lawmakers, it was a bipartisan effort. It was a women-led effort with those 11 pro-life women leading the charge on the Heartbeat Protection Act. They also wanted to create a fund for the women who now don't have abortion as an option.
Who are very vulnerable.
They're very vulnerable.
But now there are some that say, but I don't want to be a mother. This is not fair to me. And then there are people that are saying, well, we're going to help them get out of the state. What happens to that woman that doesn't want to be a mom? I don't want to spend the 9 months. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to rebel.
Let me pick up on this point, because it is true that they can still go to another state. That abortion is still an option for them in the United States of America. They just have to go to another state. And I'm not offering that.
I hope all the states start passing these laws. They're already looking at it. Absolutely. South Dakota said they're looking at it. Florida's looking at it. I think all the red states are going to say, well, maybe we ought to follow suit. This is a clever way, but go ahead. But so they can still get their abortion if they wanted to. They just have to truck on out of the state.
And here's the thing that's super interesting, Star, as you look at the research is, what economists call demand being elastic, meaning that if you want something, but if you're denied it, then do you still get it or not? And what they found with abortion is it's very elastic in that if they can't get an abortion, very frequently, women will not go to the lengths of going to another state to get it. And the reason I firmly believe for that is if you look at the polling data of women who have expressed an interest in getting an abortion, it's not because they didn't want the baby.
Yeah.
It is not because they didn't want the baby. Yes, there are a few women, like you described, who don't want to be mothers, but most women who go to abortion clinics are desperate for one reason or another. Usually it has something to do with the relationship with the father or financial concerns, all of things that can be addressed.
Some of our family. Yeah, you're right. In fact, I've had women tell me, and I've been working in pro-life, especially with the pregnancy care centers, that they're waiting for that sign. Give me a sign, God, give me a sign. And that's when you saw a lot of movement in our society where the pro-lifers were putting up billboards right outside of the clinic, or they're still out there with their little sign to say God loves you and he loves your baby. So legally, though, Jonathan, are we going to start now seeing cases of women who say, you forced me to have this? I mean, that's how we end up with Roe in the first place, because Roe, who we all knew and admire now on the other side of eternity in heaven, Norma McCorvey, she got dragged into that lawsuit. Right. In fact, she didn't even have an abortion. I don't think she even wanted an abortion.
Right.
And she was tormented for all of her life up until her death by them using her to where they even passed Roe into law. So are other vulnerable women going to now be dragged into this debate to force the issue to say, but I don't want to birth a child, because they do have other options. They don't have to keep the child. We do have many, many places, even safe spaces, to leave children with no questions asked in front of the hospital, in front of the police station, in front of the fire department. So I'm just wondering if part of the strategy of the left, having them get caught so off guard on this one, are they going to now try to find more vulnerable women like Norma?
And I think that's something that legislatures have to anticipate. Of course, the narrative around rape, the narrative around incest, those are things that, require deliberation and constant conversation about what are we actually going to do about these situations that are inappropriate for a woman to, have conceived by that, either by rape or by
which
incest.
is a very small percentage.
Which,
right? We need to say that too, because what is like
98%
98% is convenient choice.
Right.
I've got other reasons. But go ahead.
But I think what laws like what's going on in Texas, what Mississippi did for the first time, it's the focus is now back on the child. For the first time, we understand that the situation bringing this child into the world is difficult. We understand that the mother may not want the child, but we still have to answer for the child. Right. One of the experiences that I've seen, a young high school girl who had an abortion, I was in class with her. From that point on, she would always write the baby's name before writing her own name. And as a young man in high school, I realized probably for the first time that, man, there's an answer that we had to give for the child. Yes, she was in a desperate situation. Yes, this is going to affect her for the rest of her life, but there's an answer that we have to now give for the child. And that's sort of the framework that the Mississippi law is doing, certainly what Texas is considering to do.
We hadn't mentioned Mississippi, so let's talk about that for a minute, because people might not be following every single case, because you just brought up something that I hope we all will give more thought to, is humanizing that child and the impact it will have on that mom, to where, as you said, Charmaine, maybe she will, even for sacrificial reasons, say, you know what? You guys just made this real for me. This is a beating heart. Getting back to some of the points you were making earlier, and the misinformation or the lack of understanding. You're talking about 15-year-old. How much would she have known about child development? But yet now she's named her baby. She knew it was a baby.
She knew it was, and that's, I guess, the reassurance that we can have that it is unnatural for a mother to reject her child. I mean, nature will always tell us that the mothers want to protect and nurture their child. And of course, it is up to us, society, it's certainly up to the church to provide the framework and continue to provide the framework to make it easier for a mother who's in that difficult situation to say that. I can do
The
this.
church, really? I think part of the reason we have this is because,
Right.
oh, well, wait, ooh, did you know so?
Exactly.
Hey,
and
no,
the,
so-and-so
and the
daughter
stigma
ain't here
and the
no
stigma
more.
that comes as a result of that.
Oh, Lord.
Women are really scared to come forward, and even in their churches. And I think you're right. That is a real call to the church to step up and to be present in this debate. You know, there was a big op-ed that went around in the last week accusing pro-lifers of being only concerned about controlling women's bodies, which is a long-term leftist argument. And when I hear your story about your friend, and we all know some women who've had similar experiences that just break your heart. And when you think about the idea that it's just about controlling their bodies, I think about some of the research shows that young women in this age group can face up to a doubling of their suicide rate after abortion. The rates of all kinds of substance abuse and depression and anxiety. You know, it's not a good solution for women.
It's not a good solution.
It's not.
At all. I mean, I think about my own life and the turmoil, even though I didn't connect it directly with my past abortions. But boy, after you get born again and you find a newness in life, you start thinking about, wow, there had to be another way. So is this our moment to show another way? Is this our moment to say, yes, indeed, you now are in a situation that you are going to birth a child, Lord willing, because this is a great miracle and things do happen, miscarriage and other ways that people can even not carry to term. And abortion just interjects itself into all of this. Can we reassure that mom that she's going to be okay, that 15-year-old, so that they're not then dealing with that anguish and pain? Or is 200 pregnancy care enough? The phone lines, is that enough? The 100 million, is that enough?
I don't think it's enough, but I do think that we have come so far as a pro-life movement since 1973 that the pregnancy centers, these are increasingly medicalized clinics. They're providing all kinds of healthcare to women. And we have an initiative at Susan B. Anthony List called Her Plan, which is specifically focused on encouraging churches to go beyond whatever their current pro-life outreach is, and how to take it the next step further, how to...
Well, you have this as a plan. So you're going to help churches navigate through this debate.
Yes,
Really?
That's right. And also to connect pregnancy centers with each other and with the other existing private and public resources that are available to moms in need. There are women that are suffering from drug addiction who not only need help for their unborn baby, but they also need to get help for themselves in order to parent well and or to make the choice to give their child up for adoption. So there's so many existing community resources in the areas of drug rehabilitation, in partner violence, and getting women out of situations that are very dangerous for themselves and for their children. So making sure that the pregnancy centers have a network
and they know where to go. And the churches, this is great because that is something that really needs to occur. To the church's defense, pastor's so busy with marrying and burying that he doesn't know who's out in his community to do these things. And so you're going to network them. I remember I was working with a center down in Florida, and they had they put their ultrasound machine in the homeless shelter because they couldn't get into the heart of the city where all of the abortions were occurring. And the next thing you know, they had an amazing relationship. They ended up with a maternity home, and the churches got involved. So this model can have feet and legs and grow. Is there hope in it? What is going to happen? You mentioned Mississippi. Yeah. Let's go there because I don't have a lot of time. Let's go to Mississippi because that's the case going to the Supreme Court. In fact, the Supreme Court has already decided to take it on. Oral arguments are starting in December. You're telling me that they're already mounting protests at Kavanaugh's house and pretending that Amy Coney Barrett, they're going to try to pressure the justices. This is crazy time.
But it is a hopeful and optimistic time in the fact that, this is one of the first cases that the court will actually address Roe. There's been many abortion cases that have come up to the court after Roe v. Wade, but they've all dealt with this undue burden standard. Is it too hard for the woman to get an abortion? Is it violating her made-up constitutional rights? This is the first time where the focus is, like we said before, back on the child, where they're saying there's a this trimester system that was set up during Roe v. Wade, it's going right at it and saying the
Viability question.
the viability question.
15 weeks. Is this life or not?
Exactly. And it's something that the Roe court could have had information science gave them at that time that they chose to ignore. Now there's enough there, and it's going to be in the justices' faces to decide whether or not. And, it's going to be a math issue as to whether or not there'll be enough conservative justices that have the gumption to go forward and reverse Roe v. Wade. They certainly have the opportunity now in Dobbs to do so.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a really good point, because as conservatives, we like to emphasize the fact that the court is above public opinion, and that it is supposed to be the part of our government that rules from on high without being influenced by public opinion. The truth of the matter is they're human beings just like anyone else. And the left is making a concerted effort to really kind of put this noise and this chatter out there on the side of, oh no, the world would fall apart if we overturn Roe. And so I think it's important for people on our side to speak up and to influence that debate and to not be silent as we move forward towards a time when we're having those debates. And one other thing real quickly that I'd throw on the table that I'm excited about with the Dobbs case is not only do we have an emphasis on the humanity and of the child, but it's also for the first time that we're seeing a very concerted argument to take on something called the reliance interest. And one of the reasons that we have had Roe hang around as long as we have is because the justices in some of the cases developed this reliance interest that said that women have come to rely on Roe for their place in society, something that deeply offends all of us.
It should.
And what is wonderful about the Solicitor General down in Mississippi is she wrote specifically into the case taking on that argument and saying that that is an anachronism, that the American women have moved so far beyond that kind of an argument. I feel really lucky. I was able to sign on to an amicus brief before the case saying, I'm a professional woman. As professional women, we're offended by that argument. And so we need to
We're victims, we can't function. You're right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Without abortion, you're not going to be able to be a whole person. As if motherhood, there's something wrong there. But so you signed on, your amicus was into the Mississippi Dobbs case that has gone to the court, and you guys are a part of that as well?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is such good stuff. This is really such good stuff. But I do want to go back to what you said about the woman who, said about the woman, and you were talking about the viability of the life, and can that life survive outside of these arguments that they're making, the viability, it can't survive. And yet we know it can survive. Not only survive, a child after birth needs people around it anyway.
Right.
So where are you going? What are you seeing with these justices? Because you brought up how influenced they can be. We did see John Roberts on this last decision not go the way most conservatives would have thought, to just say, we're staying out of this debate. So how? Because Charmaine, you gently pass by the debate that goes on. These people won't even run for political office now because they're violent. When you look at the left, it's violent on these things. When you look at the protests at Kavanaugh's house, this is not going to be pretty. When you look at Barrett with all those children, that was one of the reasons I was even saying, "Are she sure?" Because it's so violent now, and there's little recourse. They're dismantling police forces. So what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think that in addition to praying for all the women, in particular in Texas, all the women who are contemplating abortion, that God would put the right people in their path to help them be able to choose life, we have to pray for the justices, that they would read the very sound brief that Lynn Fitch, another pro-life woman in leadership from Mississippi, put before the court, all of the amicus briefs, including the one that Charmaine signed on to, that is making the case that we need viability is not a good standard.
No, it's not standard.
You said earlier, a baby needs people around it to help it survive. I mean, we kind of all need people around us to help us survive. So viability is sort of a constantly moving target.
Most 19-year-old males aren't viable.
With that argument.
It's true.
But, in 1973, viability was considered to be around, I believe it was 28 weeks. And now it has moved to 22, if not before. And obviously, at 15 15 weeks, the baby's sucking their thumb. They can feel pain. They're responding to sound and light. You shine a little flashlight on the mother's womb and the baby reacts. So all of this is, there's so much good information before the court right now. We have to pray that the justices can withstand the horrific pressure that.
But is there something we can do? Because they can, especially that Ms. Barrett, Justice, but she's like fire. And I think that after Kavanaugh went through the fire, he's solid now. We've known Clarence Thomas has been solid. That's why they fought him so difficultly to see if he was never seated on that court. So this might be his moment to really shine. But I'm more concerned about their families and I'm wondering if writing op-eds to expose the left is going to be enough. We know that this cancel culture not only cancels you out of your job, they cancel you out of your life. You have to go underground. I know firsthand because I have to live underground now because of those crazies that came to Washington a few years back. So where do we go? I'm not sure prayer will be enough to protect their families. Is there something else that we can do in law, in public policy, in editorial?
Yes, all of the above. We've got to be praying. We have to have a presence outside the court. We need to expose
like we go to the court too, because they're going to go.
Absolutely.
So we're going to.
We always, let's bring it on.
Let's bring it on.
And, bring your winter coats.
We've been out there. Yeah. One of the things we do here at Curious headquarters, we're 2 blocks from the White House. So when the die-in and they're out there freezing in the middle of blizzard, they come here for hot chocolate just to get to the march and get to the court.
Yes, we have to show the continually speaking out, because we like to think that the court's not a political body, but they are paying attention to
they have to pay attention to
public sentiment, and to get the positive stories out there. The women who are thriving professionally, who haven't needed to not only haven't needed to kill their children to succeed, but are offended at the very idea of this, and maybe who thrive and survive because of their children. Right. So we've got to, in every aspect, whether it's writing op-eds, whether it's tweeting, whether it's participating in, public demonstrations, we've got to send a strong message to the justices that the time is now. We have this beautiful opportunity. I didn't, at least, I'll speak for myself. We didn't expect that this Mississippi case, the 15-week abortion ban, would be the one to go up to the justices. There's a lot of other pro-life laws that have been passed, 500 bills this year alone, and dozens that have already been in litigation over the last few years. This is the case that the court has decided to take up, specifically the question of whether we can protect babies before they're viable. And I have to think that this is God's plan. It's his movement. And so
maybe it's a movement for the whole society, because you have to be energized, and your donors must be energized to say, maybe pro-life candidates do work. And so we're in an election season coming very quickly here, Virginia right now. And this hopefully will motivate people in Virginia to say that maybe you're on the wrong side of the issue of crimes against humanity yet again, because they were during slavery, and now they have opportunity to say killing after the baby's born might not be a good idea. Maybe you need to change your governorship.
And as a very practical point politically, you have to look at the two parties that are usually the top two, the Republican and Democrats, and see what their positions are on this.
Well, what are their positions on?
Well, even Joe Biden, up until 2019, had some pro-life conversation that could come out of his lips. He would say it. But in order for him to get the national ticket, he had to completely go to the extreme on the left. That's how far the Democrats are going.
So you're saying, the Democrats are the party of abortion and death.
From the top down.
And the Republicans are the party of life.
And it's within their platform. It's clear in their platform.
So in the Republican platform, it protects the life of the innocent in the womb. And in the Democrat platform, it's abortion.
93%.
9 month, 9th hour.
Yeah, 93% of the time a Republican in office will follow their platform. 72% of the time a Democrat will follow their platform when they're in office. So you know what you're going to get. And thankfully there are pro-life Democrats. The great
you just said
folks in Louisiana.
This is bipartisan, so that's a good thing.
But not at the national level.
But not at the national level.
Not at the national level. Once you want to go to the national level, you better be pro-death or not, or you're not going anywhere.
From the Speaker of the House to the Attorney General to the President of the United States, if you listen to the vitriol that they have against life, the vitriol that they're spouting against Texas and what they did, it's clear for the American people to decide the next time you go to the polls who you're standing up for and who you want in power.
I hope it's clear. I hope you're hearing this. I hope it's clear, because we have new opportunities. We're not only waiting and praying and going to protect the court, and the people on the courts these days, we're going to keep voting for more good guys to get into office. But you better hear what's happening right now, because we have Virginia on the table. You got even New Jersey on the table. And we have an election again to change Washington, D.C. in 2022. Thank you, panel. Thank you so much. I'm excited. I'm going to keep my energy high for the moms, for the dads, for the grandparents, and for our country.
Amen.
So appreciate you joining with me this
Good to
day.
be with you.
I'll be right back with a few closing thoughts. Wow, that's a lot of sorting through. That's a lot of information, a lot of empathy, a lot of encouragement, a lot of compassion. Because abortion, like slavery, is a crime against humanity. And unfortunately, this crime, like slavery, has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable in our society. It's tragic what we have done to ourselves. Do you know 5 years after Dr. King's death, Roe v. Wade became national law? And since then, the number of Black children alone that have been aborted in America is heart-wrenching. More than 19 million Black babies have been killed in the womb since Roe v. Wade. There's no doubt that the abortion industry across America preys on our nation's most vulnerable, brutally dismembering their offspring under the guise of helping the poor. Isn't it a wonder that our nation's most distressed communities are drowning in moral breakdown? A family breakdown in our nation where the men then don't take responsibility for their own children? That violence has erupted all over our country like a cancer and plague? Yeah, I pray that it is the men, the fathers of the children on their way to these death mills. It's the men that sue the abortionists in Texas. I pray that Lyft and Uber, that they feel the financial pinch, since they both have decided to set up legal funds to protest the Texas law. Look, the debate about abortion that has been eating at the root of our national existence begins with a very simple question. Is life in the womb a gift from God? Is humanity the awe of being, existence itself? Is this a miracle from the heavens? So I'm thankful that many in our country and in our courts and in our political leadership still believe that humanity is made in the image of God, that He knew us before we were even formed in the womb, according to the prophet Jeremiah. Hiding behind word semantics of choice and reproductive rights and women and la 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 la. The abortion industry has promoted laws of destruction and has caused great pain to millions. It's time for the abortion to end. It's time for this crime to be over. Too many children have been sacrificed for the sake of convenience because we as a society have turned a blind eye to the sacred life growing in a mother's womb. Too many for too long have ignored the deep regrets, the sorrows that haunt many women, many men, many siblings, many grandparents that have a direct experience with abortion. In my case, as in many cases, there is healing, there's grace, there's forgiveness that is available from God. And for you that are saying, oh, this is too much, I can't do this alone, you don't have to. We have hotlines, we have pregnancy care centers, we have everything you need all across this country already set up, full of loving and gracious servants that are ready and able to serve your needs, the needs of the most vulnerable, those that are in a decision-making time and they need help. You, if you need it, we have it. If that's you, then please contact me directly. I will guide you toward receiving your peace. So many praying for you, so many desiring for your health, so many desiring for that child that now you are just graced to bear. Somebody's even praying to raise that child if you yourself are not going to. As a nation, though, it's time. It's time for us to admit that we have been wrong. It's time for a national repentance for having believed the lie of abortion. Just as we were wrong about slavery yesterday, we today are wrong about abortion. And it's time for us to admit it. And now let us go forth, get up from here with a brand new resolve, a new zeal, a new inspiration, a renewal, a revival in our hearts to move our nation forward. We have to right this awful wrong. We have to end this national crime against humanity. I'm Star Parker. I'm hopeful today, and I pray you are too. And until next week, may the God of peace be with you and all those you love.